and stuff like that. Let's get into the Packers. You and me, both Packers fans. They're facing off against the Vikings tomorrow. Their playoff life is on the line. They need to win. Granted, they can get in some other ways if they do lose this game. But they would need a lot of help. They need the Commanders to lose out. I think they'd need the Seahawks to lose to the Rams. They'd need the Lions. I think they could still knock the Lions out, beating them in the last week of the season. But really, this is their best chances. They have to win out, and then they need Washington to lose one. And that all starts tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1:25 here on the West Coast. Marcus, do you think that the Packers can beat the Vikings tomorrow?
Can the Packers beat the Vikings? Sure. There's no there is nothing, and this isn't like just the fandom. This is when you look at it, there is nothing that would lead me to believe that we can't beat the Vikings. We have the ability to. Our problem is Joe Barry. And Joe Barry, as he did in week 1 and as he's done countless times over the course of the season, Joe Barry is likely going to be the reason why the Packers lose, should they lose. I mean, this is a meaningful game in January in Lambeau, a divisional opponent against a dome football team. This spells, or should spell, Packer victory when it's all said and done. But again, Joe Barry is going to find a way to get in the way. And don't get me wrong, the Vikings are a good football team. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is closing in on history. Kirk Cousins hasn't been playing that bad himself. His defense has been a lot better than I thought it would be. Kevin O'Connell is firmly in the Coach of the Year discussion. Obviously, they've already clinched the division. They've already clinched the playoffs. But they have all these things going for them, right? So, obviously, because it's a divisional game, the Vikings aren't going to rest their starters. We're going to see a full-strength Vikings team come Sunday, because what more would the Vikings love to do than be the reason why the Packers aren't in the playoffs? Of course, we can win this game. This is a winnable game. We have seen the Vikings be very, very human. The Vikings are not world beaters. The Vikings are not an unstoppable football team. I get it. They're 11-0 in one-score games, but they've had some bad losses. The losses that they've suffered have been bad losses, and despite being 11-0 in close games, they haven't played that great throughout the course of the season. They're 12-3 with a point differential of +5. Now, a lot of that is anchored down by the 37-point loss to the Cowboys and the loss to the Eagles earlier in the season in primetime as well. But the Vikings are not this invincible, unstoppable, world-beating football team. This is not a team that you look at and you say, yikes, chances are slim. It's a divisional game. It's Aaron Rodgers playing against the Vikings at home in Lambeau. Christian Watson's been playing good ball. Nixon's been playing great ball as a returner. The only two things that are going to keep us from winning this game are Joe Barry just making stupid decisions, i.e. not letting Jair Alexander follow Jettis throughout the course of the game, and also Matt LaFleur not getting the ball to the two best players on the team, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. As long as we run the ball, as long as Joe Barry doesn't make dumb mistakes, we should walk out of Lambeau with a win and keep our playoff destiny, for the most part, in our own hands.
Yeah, I truly think that if we are able to win out, I think we're going to get in. I think the Commanders pulling Heineke and now putting in Wentz is very spotty. If he plays very well this week, I don't think he's going to play well next week. And you even look at the two teams they're playing. Yeah, the Browns aren't playing super well. Deshaun Watson's looked really bad since coming back from suspension. But the Browns, I think they still are a average football team, which is what I think the Commanders are, and honestly what I think the Packers are. So I think that game can go either way. And we saw Cooper Rush, the Commanders play the Cowboys in the final week of the season. We saw their backup quarterback Cooper Rush beat them by 15 earlier this year. Who's to say they can't do it again? Their defense has been super underwhelming. So I think if the Packers are able to win out, I think it's very likely that they get into the playoffs. But this week, health is going to play a huge role in this game. The Vikings starting center is already out there. Backup center, I think he's allowed 15 pressures in 3 games. Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt should have a field day up the gut for that. But then health on the Packers side, Christian Watson, you talked about how big of an impact he's had. He's questionable with a hip. Granted, he's questionable and not doubtful, so I feel a lot better about it. He practiced, I think, the past day or past 2 days. Keyshawn Nixon, he didn't practice, but he's listed as questionable as well. He didn't practice yesterday. But I do think, at least in Nixon's case, him not practicing is probably a good thing. I don't think they're going to throw him out there at corner. I think he's just going, if he is playing, he's just going to go out there and be our returner. But yeah, the Vikings, as you kind of talked about, they haven't been super overwhelming this year on anything. Their defense is fifth to the bottom in terms of points per game. They're giving up almost 25 points a game, 24.9 to be exact. Their offense hasn't exactly been world beating either. I mean, they've put up a good amount of points per game. They're just they're inside the top 10. I think they're at 7th in points per game. They're with 25.5. But again, they have not necessarily been world beaters. I don't think, they only are averaging 10 more yards per game than the Packers offense that we all think is borderline putrid, or at least was for a while. But we're going to have to see a vintage Aaron Rodgers performance, because if we don't have Christian Watson, I don't think we have a chance to win. Even with him, I think it's still going to be pretty tough. ESPN's given us a 60% chance to wind up winning this game. They're favored in the game by, I believe it's 3. So kind of exactly what you would expect for a division home game. But Rodgers is going to have to pull something out that we haven't really seen from him all year. He hasn't passed for over 260 yards all year. He only has one game of 3 touchdown passes all year, and that was against the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to have to see something like that. We're going to have to see, where he's up there in completion percentage around 70, where he's probably at like 300 yards, something like that. We're going to have to see a game where he's not turning the ball over. Granted, it hasn't bitten us the past couple of games, and the Miami interception should have been called back for a pass interference, but Rodgers has games with even going back to the start of the season against Minnesota, 1 interception, no touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. He has that a couple of times against Buffalo, New England, as well as Tampa Bay. He had the really bad game versus Detroit with 3 picks. And then, Philly, 2 picks, and then the Rams and Miami games, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. We're going to have to see something in him play a lot more consistent than he has all year. I think if he has all of his guys back, we should see him play a little bit more consistently, and especially if we're going to have both of the playmakers on the offense and the receiving core back. If Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are playing, I think the Packers should be able to win this game. Just like you, I'm going to pick the Vikings to win the game just because I think that for whatever reason, this Vikings team seems to have like a team of destiny vibes. Kind of like like the 2018 Bears, where they thought it was their division for the long haul, but really it wound up just being that 1 year sort of thing where you're like, how are they even winning games? You already talked about the point differential. The Packers have not necessarily been fantastic in 1-score games. They haven't been horrible, but they haven't been great. I think they're 3-4 in 1-score games, but the Vikings, their 1-score game luck is going to run out at some point. But I think if this game's close towards the end, I can't trust the Packers. I've seen them in close games with the Lions. They lost. I've seen them in close games with the Commanders. They lost. The Giants, they lost. Even like the Vikings game that was out of hand score-wise, I felt was still a fairly close game-ish, and they lost. Their defense couldn't get a stop versus the Eagles. Their offense couldn't put up anything versus the Titans. I think that I for sure a little bit have kind of been blinded a little bit by this win streak, right? They've beaten 2 teams that haven't been very good, or, that are bottom 5 teams. And then they were losing by 10 points before Tua got a concussion, allegedly, and threw us 3 picks. And maybe that says something good about the defense, finally being in position. And, they've had really bad luck with dropping the picks that they should get, or, getting bad bounces. So maybe that luck is starting to finally come back our way. But I think that the Vikings just have some luck to them. Again, I'm rooting for the Packers, and I'm even hoping that this is somewhat of a jinx. But I'm going to take the Vikings in a close one. I'm going to take them 27-24.
Yeah. We're going to lose, but it'd be nice if we win.